Suwe Halo, selamat pagi. Sehat teman-teman semuanya. Pak Sur Budikan.
Pagi Budikan. Kita sudah masuk belum? Budikan, kita mulai deh. Halo Budikan.
Monggo dimulai saja Pak Sur.
Oh iya.
Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. On behalf of the committee, I would like to extend a warm welcome to all of you for taking the time to attend this event. Honorable the Dean of the Faculty of Humanities Universitas Diponegoro, Ibu Dr. Nurhayati M. Hum, respectable the head of the study program in Master of Literature Universitas Diponegoro, Bapak Dr. M. Suryadi M. Hum, Punti Rahayu Nurmaning Tias, MS, as today's moderator. The Excellency, the keynote speakers, Mrs. Ankita Rathor, PhD, from Georgia Institute of Technology, Ibu Eta Farmacelia Nur Hadi, PhD, from Faculty of Humanities Universitas Diponegoro, and all distinguished participants of this international seminar. My name is Tianti Nur Mahatmi. It's a precious chance for me to be your Master of Ceremony on this very special occasion, international seminar about feminism postcolonially. This event contains several sections. Let me read them for you. The first is opening. The second is singing national anthem, Indonesia Raya. The third is a report from the head of the study program Master in Literature. The fourth is a speech from the Dean of the Faculty of Humanities Universitas Diponegoro. The fifth is the documentation session. The sixth is a discussion panel and Q&A session. The next is the symbolic certificate handover to the keynote speakers. And the last is closing. And before we begin, I'd like to take a few moments to explain the rules of the today's seminar. The first, participants are obliged to use the virtual background that has been shared in the WhatsApp group. Second, participants must turn off the loudspeaker or microphone during the event unless they have been invited to speak by the host or moderator. The third, participants are requested to change the display with the full name. For instance, Setianti Nur Mahatmi _ Universitas Diponegoro. The fourth, participants are required to fill in the attendance list, and the attendance link will be shared in the Zoom chat after the presentation from all the speakers. The fifth, participants can ask questions in the chat Zoom with the format full name _institution _question, or participants can raise hand to deliver the question directly. We hope that you will adhere to these rules. Thank you for your cooperation. The next agenda is singing the national anthem, Indonesia Raya. All the participants are requested to prepare themselves in an upright position. The next agenda is a report from the head of the study program of Master in Literature, Universitas Diponegoro. Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome Bapak Dr. M. Suryadi M. Hum.
Terima kasih. Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Salam sejahtera bagi kita semua. Yang terhormat Ibu Dekan Fakultas Ilmu Budaya Universitas Diponegoro, Ibu Dr. Nurhayati M. Hum. Yang terhormat para Wakil Dekan Fakultas Ilmu Budaya, Bapak Profesor Dr. Alamsyah dan Bapak Suharyo. Dan yang terhormat Ibu narasumber, Ibu Ankita Lator PhD, Lator ya. Mohon maaf kalau kami salah mengucapkan. Dan juga Bu Eta. Yang saya hormati Bapak Ketua Departemen, Bapak Ibu Ketua Prodi, dan Bapak Ibu dosen di lingkungan Fakultas Ilmu Budaya, dan serta para peserta webinar internasional Feminism Postcolonial yang berbahagia. Pertama-tama, mari kita bersyukur kepada Allah Subhanahu wa Ta'ala pada acara ini pada pagi hari ini. Saya juga mengucapkan terima kasih biasa Halo? Ya, mohon maaf terputus koneksi. Saya langsung saja. Saya laporkan bahwa kegiatan ini diikuti yang terdaftar adalah 221 peserta dari berbagai negara dan lembaga, antara lain dari Abu Dhabi University, kemudian the Indira Gandhi National Open University, UA, Lahore, Pakistan, kemudian Pasim National University, dari Universitas Indonesia, dari Universitas Gadjah Mada, Universitas Balikpapan, Universitas Kairun, kemudian Universitas Udayana, dan beberapa balai bahasa yang ada di Nusantara. Adapun pembicara pada kegiatan ini, pertama kami ucapkan selamat datang kepada Ibu Ankita Ratur, PhD dari Jogja Institute of Technology Amerika, kemudian Ibu Eta Farmaselia Nurul Hadi, PhD dari Indonesia, dari Fakultas Ilmu Budaya Undip. Dan kami laporkan pula ke depan program studi Magister Ilmu Sastra juga akan mengadakan kegiatan rutin yaitu soft skill untuk meningkatkan kekuatan intelektual dari mahasiswa Magister Ilmu Linguistik yang akan dilaksanakan tanggal 20 Oktober 2023. Baik Bapak Ibu peserta seminar internasional ini, kami ucapkan terima kasih dan selamat mengikuti seminar ini sampai selesai. Terima kasih. Wassalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Terima kasih MC. Saya silakan kembali.
Thank you, Bapak Suryadi, for the report. The next agenda is a speech from the Dean, Faculty of Humanities, Universitas Diponegoro, Ibu Dr. Nurhayati M. Hum. Time is yours.
Thank you, Master of Ceremony. Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Salam sejahtera untuk kita semua. Namo Buddhaya, salam kebajikan. This is the greeting using Indonesian language. The Honorable, the invited speakers, Ibu or Miss Ankita Ratur, PhD, from Georgia Institute of Technology. Welcome to Undip. And then the Honorable, the second invited speakers, Ibu Eta Farmaselia Nurul Hadi, PhD, from Universitas Diponegoro, the host of this seminar. Vice Deans, the head of the literature department, and then also the Honorable, the head of the study program on Master of Literature, Bapak Dr. M. Suryadi, the heads of other departments and study programs in Faculty of Humanities, Universitas Diponegoro, lecturers, students, and all participants that joining in this webinar. Good morning and welcome to the Faculty of Humanities, Universitas Diponegoro. Thank you for joining this seminar. And in this opportunity, I would like to thank you to the study program of Master of Literature who hold this important event, that is an international webinar with the interest topic. It's about feminism postcolonially. Thank you very much. And we also deliver appreciation to the study program of Master of Literature that always provide the current issues, and invite the global expert in literature using contemporary approaches and choosing global issues on literature and culture, of course. I know that the purpose of this webinar or international webinar here is to make the postgraduate students more open-minded and in conducting research, to provide the mean or the tool we are as a faculty of research. Bapak Dr. M. Suryadi, Bapak Dr. Soekarjo Waluyo, thank you very much for always conducting the valuable event. And ladies and gentlemen, these events is also to celebrate the two important occasions in Universitas Diponegoro. That is about the Dies Natalis of Faculty of Humanities, Universitas Diponegoro. The old is 58. And then the second one is also to celebrate Dies Natalis Universitas Diponegoro to 66. In this occasion, on behalf of the Faculty of Humanities, Universitas Diponegoro, I would like to thank to both of the invited speaker, Ibu Eta Farmacelia, PhD, and also Ibu Ankita Ratur, PhD, for giving your knowledge to all of the participants. We also thank you for Bapak Dr. Suryadi M. Hum and team who conducted this international webinar, and we hope that this event can be beneficiary for all of the participants joining here. Thank you very much and have enjoyed this webinar, and we apologize if there is a technical problem during this international webinar. Thank you very much. Wassalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh.
Thank you very much for this speech, Ibu Nur Hayati. Now we jump into the documentation section. All the attendees are kindly asked to open your cameras so that documentation session can be executed immediately. I'll start for the first slide. I'll call it 1, 2, 1, 2, 3. Thank you. Next, for the second slide. Yeah. 1, 2, 3. Next, for the third slide. 1, 2, 3. And then fourth slide. 1, 2, 3. Thank you. And the fifth slide. 1, 2, 3. And the sixth slide. 1, 2, 3. Thank you. Thank you so much. Now let's start to our main session. So ladies and gentlemen, without any further ado, let me hand over you to our moderator. We have Punti Rahayu Nurmaning Tias, MS, who will guide the discussion panel and Q&A session this morning. Please welcome Punti Rahayu.
Okay, thank you so much, Mbak Setiawati. Good morning, everyone. It's a pleasure for me to be the moderator for today's event, the international webinar Feminism Postcolonially. Ladies and gentlemen, today our topic of discussion is really interesting because we are going to find out more about feminism postcolonially with our special speakers, Ms. Ankita PhD from Georgia Institute of Technology, and Ms. Eta Farmacelia PhD from Diponegoro University. But firstly, before we dive into our main topic, let me introduce you guys to our special guest speaker, Ms. Ankita Ratur PhD. Ms. Ankita Ratur PhD finished her PhD at Louisiana State University. Her dissertation, Subaltern Corpse, Gender, and Death in Bollywood, analyzed the death grill trope in Hindi cinema through a post-colonial lens. She is a former Fulbright scholar and currently working in Georgia Institute of Technology for undergraduate courses. She has over a decade of teaching experience. She was a Fulbright foreign language teaching assistant at the University of Hawaii Manoa and worked at Louisiana State University for undergraduate courses. Ms. Ankita Ratur's research field and interest includes post-colonial forms of violence across the intersections of gender, caste, class, and the state. Her academic and popular articles have been published in Routledge's anthology on South Asian cinema, E-Sign India, Feminism in India, Fair Observer, and International Relations, to name a few. Her work is for women and about women. As you can see on your screen, that Ms. Ankita has miles of achievements, and we are lucky that today we are going to hear part of her research interests. And for your information, guys, Ms. Ankita generously donated to us several books. Maybe the admin can show the book that there are 3 books. So there is 3 books that Ms. Ankita donated to us. The first book is Feminism Without the Bollywood Reader, edited by Rajinder Dudra and Jigna Desai. Sorry if I pronounce it wrong. And the second book, Against White Feminism, Notes on Disruption, by Rafia Zakaria. And the third one, Feminism Without Borders, Decolonizing Theory, Practicing Solidarity, from Chandra Talpade Mohanty. Thank you so much, Ms. Ankita Ratur. I, on behalf of the Master of Literature, would like to thank you for your book donation. We really appreciate this, and it's really such an honor for us. So without any further ado, ladies and gentlemen, please welcome Ms. Ankita Ratur, PhD.
Thank you so much for this wonderful introduction and for having me here. It is always a pleasure to think about feminism, post-colonialism, beyond the Western boundaries. So thank you once again for organizing this. I will start with my presentation. I have I have some slides prepared, so I'm gonna just share my screen. My talk might go above 30 minutes, so I apologize in advance, and please feel free to let me know if you're like, you want me to finish it sooner. Can you see my screen?
Yes.
Okay, so I'm just gonna, okay, thank you. So I have titled today's conversation about dismantling white Western feminism. And this topic is very vast, very long, which cannot be covered in 30 minutes, but of course it can be a beginning and we can start thinking about it. Before I begin, let us have a clear understanding of what the talk is trying to do and not to do. I always think a clarification is a good way to start, because West and white can be very big terminologies to be used. I am not trying to claim any authority on post-colonial feminism. There are many more writers to engage with, and we should be engaging with them. Secondly, I am also not trying to universalize a singular meaning of West and white. We all know it is a very broader term. And what I am referring to West and white is also beyond the geographical region and race. I am thinking about the ideological construction of Westernness and whiteness, which can be followed by people of color too. The talk is definitely not anti-West or anti-white, but it is definitely about introducing non-Western, non-white interventions in the conversation around feminism, academically or popular form. And definitely, last but not least, I'm not trying to trivialize white or Western women's struggles. But what I'm trying to do is think about this gender movement, think about this feminist movement within the context of colonialism and the amount of violence that has gone into maintaining the colonial rule over 80% of the world at one time, and the capacity of violence this colonial rule has also made available to the previously colonized countries. Having said that, I'm interested in looking at the flow of feminist messaging in this context, in the age of popular social media, in the age of US-influenced global cultural consciousness. And I'm going to talk about that more. Yes, I'm definitely challenging the white and Western feminist pep talk, which is quite superficial. It's great to hear to, it's great to listen to, but often than not, it lacks the depth and the connections and the intersectionality that we need to take into consideration. And I'm also analyzing our ideological whiteness and elitism. I am a postdoctoral candidate in an American institute. I have been living in US for more than 6 years. So, you know, I'm very much liable to follow the ideological foundations that I'm set to criticize. And collectively, I think I would want us to collectively think about what does it even mean to decolonize feminism, and so on and so forth. Whenever I start any talk, whether it is an invited talk or a lecture I'm giving, even in my classroom, I always start with a map. This is a map from Vox. And it shows, it gives you the range of countries that have been under European control. And I'm arguing that feminism is a movement, it is very much important to understand feminism within this context. Look at the colonized and the controlled by Europe region. And when I say flow of message, I am really thinking about how the message around feminism and gender flows from West to the East. I have seen this as a much more aggressive movement than the opposite side. The question is, do we access non-Western interventions in feminism as equally as we access the Western interventions in feminism? Now, when I think of that map I showed you, it is when we think of colonialism, it meant displacing the lives and ideologies and gender dynamics of Native people, right? And replacing it with a particular kind of white Western standard. So when I approach feminism, for me, it's like, it's a very different world I inhabited as an Indian woman in comparison to my Western counterpart. So here's the image, and both these images are from the year 1943. On one side, you can see the famous Rosie de Riveter, this famous icon during World War II in US. So long story short, feminist rhetoric was used to encourage women to come and help US during World War II and help in the workforce because men were fighting the war. And this image went on becoming a very famous feminist message. During the same year, you can see on the left, is the Bengal famine of 1943 in Bengal, India, during colonial rule, which was when almost 4 million people starved to death because Winston Churchill diverted all the resources, food, storage, money, to fund the wars. And so when I think of feminism, when I started thinking about feminism, when it was introduced to me, it was very different. What does that mean is also looking at the different of world. Here is another example from African-American side of Sojourner Truth. This is an excerpt from her speech, Ain't I a Woman, during a convention in 1851. Truth was a previously enslaved woman. And here she says that, wow, I'm so happy that we are talking about women's rights, but ain't I a woman? Like, I'm also a woman. I am not able to get any advantages of such conversation. And here's another image. White Western feminists and people like me, people like us from the non-Western areas, we inhabit very different worlds. On one image, you can see a segregated space for European ladies during an Indian wedding. And on one side, you can see a white woman being serviced by a man of color, which tells you that, well, all men are not equal. Let me tell you a story. In 1991, and this is a very short story about how I was introduced to feminism, Indian economy had to open itself to foreign investors in 1991. Our economy liberalized, right? Because we were not able to sustain just by ourselves. So what happened? A bunch of Hollywood movies, a bunch of American TV serials made its way to our TV screens. And I remember in late 90s and early 2000 watching this show Friends, which was a very famous 1990s sitcom. And maybe you all have heard of it, or many of you might have watched it. And it was very interesting because that was where I first heard the word feminism. But since I didn't have internet, and I was born and brought up in Bihar, in the eastern part of India, which is one of the poorest states right now in India, even though pre-colonially it was one of the richest, it has a lot of corruption, a lot of crime. It was not until later I would have an access to internet and I would Google feminism and what it means. So when I started looking at the definition, I was very, very impressed. I was like, wow, this is great. As women, we can talk about our rights, our lives, we have a space. But at the same time, I also thought, wait a minute, women around me are already doing it. There are Indian women around me who are already living a feminist life, though they are not claiming that this is feminism. So I really want us to think about that, how Western white feminism or intellectual discourse is about naming things. And does that mean just because we haven't named it, it's not feminism? So this was my experience and my beginning to think about feminism. And I'm definitely influenced by so many post-colonial feminists and feminists of color like Rafia Zakaria, Chandra Mohanty, Bell Hooks, Audre Lorde, who make a point. Zakaria, this is an excerpt from the book Against White Feminism, where she says that it's very important to understand that white women feminists emerge in a context of colonialism, and they have profited from colonialism and slavery and from race politics, right? And she goes on to say that even though there is so much great rhetoric around intersectionality and listening to other women, positions of power are still held by white women, and they are not ready to leave that space for women of color to join them. So when I talk about dismantling white Western feminism, I always think of it as a sword. Double-edged sword means, like, I do not want this talk to be a way to just criticize white and Western women and to practice misogyny against them. I also think about the English word feminism. You know, as a post-colonialist, I have a conflicting relationship with the language itself, even though I have a PhD degree in that. So what does that mean? I also think about, sorry, is anybody saying anything? Okay. Okay, I will continue. I also think about the colonial contact, and I think about that, yes, obviously, just because we're engaging with Western culture, not everything is bad. We are in conversation, we are learning few things, and it's good. And I want us to think about that, but I specifically want us to think about feminism as a lived experience versus this academic jargon that Western white feminists have produced, and it has been exported and has become accessible for the rest of the world much easily than the other way around. And feminism in the age of contentification. What it means is, in this age of hyperconsumerism, through social media rhetoric, what kind of feminist messages are we getting? I am going to briefly introduce these three terms through postcolonial perspective. First is colonial rationalization, and I will tell you why it is linked and how it is linked to white Western feminism and the thing I'm talking about. First is colonial rationalization. Now, during the 19th century, liberal progressive ideas were emerging. So the West was also trying to develop into this liberal space, right? Thinking about human rights, equal rights. However, it was still maintaining colonial rule, which was opposite to its views, to its progressive views. So what does that mean? That means colonialism, the process of colonialism had to be rationalized. They had to come up with a discourse which can say that, yes, we are progressive, but colonialism is needed. And here comes the phrase, white man's burden, which you can read in Rudyard Kipling's poem of the same name, which very, in simple words, it means that it is the white man's burden to go to this darker corners of the world, Eastern spaces, and raise these people to the level of the whiteness and have them follow their own, a particular religion, a particular way of speaking. So that's how colonialism was rationalized, okay? I argue that the same kind of rationalization is present in white Western feminist rhetoric, and we'll get into it. The second word, Orientalism, comes from Edward Said. What it means is that the Occident, the West, started defining the East, the Orient, specifically for the Western audience. What does that mean? That means extreme binaries of East and West. East is dangerous, West is rational. People in the Eastern side of the world are very barbaric. We are the West, we are very progressed, we are very well behaved. Eastern women are, either very immoral or very exotic. Eastern men are barbaric, and hence we are the savior. And this kind of Orientalist tones are still present in Western white feminist rhetoric. The third, monolith third world women, comes from Chandra Mohanty, who says that one of the biggest problems with white Western feminist rhetoric is creating a singular meaning out of the so-called third world women. Third world is not a phrase I'm using, should not be used as a phrase anymore, because of course it is a colonial construction, but I am referring to Mohanty's piece here, that all of us, the non-Western women are the same. Think of this word BIPOC, Black, Indigenous, people of color, and the people of color are just in the same box, and our differences are kind of totally forgotten. And hence, just like a white man's burden emerges a white woman's burden. Here, if you can see the image, this is Alison Renew, and very recently she made news of saving the Afghan robotics team after Taliban took over. It blew up. Everybody was talking about this news here in the US. But here's the catch. The lawyer team of the robotics team finally spoke out, and they were like, this is not true. She's not some kind of savior. She's only serving her personal goals. It was a very long process of rescuing these girls and releasing their photos. And, by putting it out in the public, she's putting a lot of lives in danger of the women and people who are still in Afghanistan. So I really want us to think about that. And I also want to emphasize that this kind of saviorism, this white woman's burden, is actually very much the remnant of white Christian missionary saviorism that was emboldened during the colonial era, and which is still very much visible in white feminists, even though they claim that, you know, we are non-believers or we are atheists. This white saviorism rooted in a particular religious ideology is very much present in the way they conduct their feminism. And this kind of saviorism gives rise to what Zakaria calls a white feminist industrial complex. Here is an image from a Hollywood movie, Zero Dark 30. The actress Jessica Chastain plays a central character there. She's a white woman who is not afraid to kill, who is not afraid to torture the terrorists, and who is not afraid to save brown women from brown men, which is also what Gayatri Spivak talks about, that how feminism, Western white feminism, became this whole process of saving brown women from brown men. And hence, what it means is that white Western women succumbed to the same power dynamic that they were actually set to criticize in the white male domain. So another example of this, you can look at this image here, which is a French colonial poster which was distributed during the Algerian Revolution, and it says, "Unveil yourself, aren't you pretty?" Frantz Fanon, a very important post-colonialist and anti-colonialist thinker and theorist, says that how veiling became a whole feminist agenda in the white Western spaces, and how this invisibility of a Muslim woman's, of a veiled Muslim woman's body draws attention to itself, because this woman who sees without being looked at frustrates the colonizer. So this unveiling of the Muslim woman became a very important part of the whole feminist movement in the West, especially after 9/11 in the US, where it was, and hence what you see is emerging of different kind of messaging. Here, just look at this statement for a second. Orientalism means that the East must be rationalized, right? It's already figured out. You know, there is no knowledge that we as Orient can claim. The West has already figured us out. We are being written about, and knowledge about us is being propagated globally by the West. You can easily change that East to a non-white woman. In the same way, the white feminist project rationalizes the non-white women. Their subjectivities are already figured out. They are written about, and their knowledge is propagated globally by the white Western feminist rhetoric. And this is how it looks like, where a white woman tells you, let me tell you how oppressive your culture is. What that means is they are not listening to the language you are speaking. They are only able to listen to something they can understand. So it's a one-way communication. It's not a dialogue, and there is an unwillingness to learn. Among the many problems of Western white feminist rhetoric is this: uncovering equals to power. Look at this image of actress Gal Gadot from the movie Wonder Woman. She's a hypersexualized woman, and hence she's very powerful. And I criticize this messaging of white feminist movement because I see it inherently just being at the service of the male gaze. I also look at this particular body. This body, this kind of body, needs all kind of caring, all kind of consumerist attitude to maintain itself in its power position, right? This kind of uncovering, powerful body rhetoric is not accessible to everybody. Hence, uncovering becomes power. And if you are covered, if you are traditionally dressed, you are oppressed. I will give you a very funny example. I first came to the US in 2013, and I was in Hawaii, Honolulu, as a Fulbright scholar. And one day, me and two of my white women friends, we decided to go to the beach. I was dressed in a jeans, very comfortable jeans, and a black t-shirt. And soon we went there, and I don't like getting into the beach in the water, and I don't like wearing a bikini or anything. That's my choice. But very soon they just assumed that I'm oppressed just because I'm from India, and I'm not used to wearing shorts and everything. I am, by the way, but it was just an assumption. And it was so funny because then these two women start talking to each other while I'm just standing on one side, very comfortable in my jeans and t-shirt, enjoying the weather. And I was not even introduced in the topic. And this relates to another problematic messaging. Sexual freedom is all freedom. You must figure out who you are, what your sex is, how much you enjoy copulation, how much you enjoy having sex. And what Zakaria calls is, it's all about placing Carrie, this white woman's image from the movie Sex in the City, in countries like India and Nigeria. Like, this is all it is. Go figure out your sexuality, go figure out love, go figure out what you want to do. And which also gives to a problematic messaging. For example, love marriage is very glorified. And I have another example. I remember I was, how friends ask you, tell me about your family. And I said, my sister, she's in an arranged marriage. And you will not believe how many white women go, oh, I'm so sorry. Why are you sorry? There is a difference between arranged marriage and forced marriage. My sister is very happy. So there is this belief that you have to find the love that you want to have. Love cannot be arranged, okay? And hence they totally miss the point how other cultures have developed. And because they are not similar to their worldview, they are oppressed. Moving on, so body becomes the very central force of white feminist movement. My body, my choice. I am not criticizing this movement at all. Absolutely fine. Women have the choice to wear what they want. Women should not face discrimination, violence, just because they are choosing to wear something. But again, as a post-colonialist, I keep thinking about the context of violence. In India, almost 90 women are sexually assaulted every day, around 90 female bodies, young children, old women. And sometimes I think, what would it mean for an average Indian woman to assert the choice over her body in such a context? And, I am from Bihar, as I told you. And I think, okay, let me go back to Bihar. Let me talk to a working class woman who is a daily laborer, not in English, in a very regional dialect, and explain this to her. I assume she will feel empowered by it. I assume she'll be like, well, that's a noble thought. But I will also assume she'll be like, well, what are the ways you can help me assert this choice? And honestly, I can't. And these are some of the conversations which are absolutely missing from the white Western feminist spaces. And especially I'm talking about my experiences too as living in the US. And also when it comes to so much emphasis on body, especially in the age of social media, I really want us to think about, do we just start looking same, very similar in the way we are presenting ourselves through these mediums beyond our racial differences? And what does that mean? What does that mean when feminist thought, when conversations like this keep on happening in an economy, in a hyper-consumer capitalist economy, where working class women are not even considered? Another problem with Western white feminism, which Zakaria talks, is called the cult of relatability. This is very funny, actually, which means that when you're talking to a bunch of white feminists, you have to make your story very relatable. So, if I'm skateboarding in a sari, that's relatable. That's empowering. But if I'm making a chai in a sari, maybe not that much. So Zakaria in her book gives this example where she's sitting with this white feminist. They are in a wine bar and everybody's sharing their stories. But Zakaria, who was a child bride, who came to US, who was in an abusive marriage and then escaped, just wings it off. She's like, oh, the regular, I came to US for education, I stayed. And she says that this is what I had to reduce to because, it creates a lot of nervousness. Nobody is ready to engage with that side of your story. So you have to keep it light. You have to keep it breezy. You have to keep it very relatable and say things in a language that your average white Western feminist understands. Another problem is all men are patriarchal. This is a meme I got from Game of Thrones, Valar Morghulis, which means all men must die. And yes, there are very reactionary feminists within the white Western feminist spaces. And what they miss is like, they follow a very limited notion of masculinity. And we are at a point where masculinity is so much demonized, but I'm from a culture where it was not so. You know, many indigenous cultures believe in the overlap of masculine, feminine qualities, right? A feminine woman can have masculine traits and vice versa. Also, I grew up in a culture where patriarchy is very much practiced by fellow women. So, you know, and then hence it becomes an white Western feminist, they pursue a very unforgiving nature. You know, you're a man, if you're a white man, you're a cisgender heterosexual white man, there is no coming back, no space for understanding, no space for forgiveness. And these are some of the ways, these are some of the rhetoric that women of color don't really adhere to, and they are not really encouraged to be in such a feminist space. So, and definitely there is a lot more problematic messaging. Power is fluid. Power is fluid. And let me give you an example. Asia Argento is one example in the US context who spoke about how she was sexually abused by Harvey Weinstein, this Hollywood producer. But later on, it was also found that she herself sexually harassed a gay man. So there is this inability to dissect that power is fluid and anybody in the position of power can abuse it. Working class feminist thought is not engaged with at all. You do you, girl. You're going to hear this message a lot from white Western feminists. And I always ask, like, what does that even mean? What do you mean you do you? I can't do everything. And it's okay. It is okay if, you know, I am not trying to be the lone wolf. So there is a hero narrative, like, yeah, you can exist on your own, go do your things alone, which is kind of very anti-communal, which is like, no, there are women of color, there are cultures of color where community is very important, where family is important, and it's okay to get their help and get their suggestions, right? And obviously, another problematic thing is there is a blurring distinction between oppression and inconvenience. What is really oppression? Are you really inconvenienced as a white Western woman, or are you really oppressed? And these are the problematic messaging you get. And last but not least, the trap of Western rationality, that is what I call it. What I mean is when we think of critical thinking, we move from a problem to a solution, right? So a white Western feminist space is already a critical thinking space, right? Now I am entering this critical space as a woman of color, as a woman from India. When I'm entering a space, I already know what stereotypes exist in this Western space, right? So I'm in a bind. I really want to tell these white Western feminists that, hey, here are the good things about my culture, but I have to start with the problem first. So the hypercriticism of your culture is needed. The more you criticize your patriarchy, your culture, the more popular you are, which I always think is a bind for a woman of color, for a feminist of color, because it's like, no, let's talk about colonialism. Let's talk about what your people did. but there's a very limited space. And if it happens in such a way that you will see and you'll be like, oh, wow, they're talking about it, but it's merely a show off. It never really culminates into actual changes in the place. But I also want to critically think about ourselves. You know, this is an image which went viral. I'm sorry, it's a little blurry, from an Instagram influencer. She's an Indian woman who goes to the Mumbai slums and clicks pictures. It went over internet. She has more than 130,000 followers, and people were criticizing that this is poverty porn. You are kind of creating a commodity out of an experience which you have no idea about. All of this is to say that we ourselves moving in this space so much affected by white Western ideology through popular culture, post-colonialism, whatever, are also vulnerable to fall into the same trap of white Western feminists. We can be the native elite. I speak English, I have a PhD, I have definitely more elitism than the rest of the women in India. I can also self-orientalize my own culture. I will end this talk and on this term. Can we decolonize feminism? What does it mean? Of course, one of the things is like, okay, hey, white women, cede some space, create some space for us. Should we redesign feminist theory? Should we rename it? Is renaming enough? Should we start thinking of post-colonialism as a pedagogical approach? Like, yes, let's talk about colonialism as the beginning point of a major knowledge production. And I will stop sharing here. And this was majorly my talk to kind of think about this power movements, to kind of think about who speaks for who is included, who is excluded, and how can we decolonize. And thank you so much for listening to me. And I will end the talk here. Thank you.
Okay, thank you so much, Miss Ankita. That was really very rich presentation, very insightful and eye-opening, and it covers a lot. So, as we can see, post-colonial feminism is a way to look beyond the whitewashing of feminism and to understand the nuance of power, geopolitics, and money at play in the oppression and exploitation of various people. And thus, for each feminist to become accountable for their own action and activism. In reality, feminism is not feminism unless it is post-colonially. So, maybe we can jump into our next speaker, Miss Etta Farmacelia, PhD, our lovely lecturer. But before it, let me introduce you guys to Miss Etta. Miss Etta Farmacelia Nurul Hadi grew up wanting to be a pharmacist, yet she pursued her master's and PhD in English. She is lecturer at the English department and Master of Literature of Diponegoro University. She earned her bachelor and master's degree from her alma mater, Diponegoro University. Ms. Etta is among the very few Indonesian scholars who have won 2 Fulbright grants. With the Fulbright Master Degree Scholarship, she went to Kansas University and earned her second MA. The Dikti-funded Fulbright grants for Indonesian lecturers allows her to pursue her doctoral study in Louisiana State University and earn her PhD. So without any further ado, ladies and gentlemen, please welcome Miss Etta Farmacelia, PhD.
Good morning, everybody. Thank you, Mbak Punti, and thank you, Ankita, for sharing your knowledge and also provoking slides, provoking thoughts that we are going to discuss later. So my presentation will be short. Before that, thank you for the participants. I see a number of my friends, all friends here. So thank you, everybody, for coming to this webinar. Let's have a discussion. We have heard a lot from Ankita. I'm going to give an example from Indonesian context, and the female figure that I'm going to talk about is the figure that is so familiar that everybody in Indonesia is familiar with this. So I'm going to talk about Kartini. So yeah, all of us learn about Kartini. We celebrate Kartini Day every year on April the 21st. Let me share my screen. So can all of you see? Yeah, so I'm going to talk about era Kartini. Just like Ankita gave us the map of the world, that most part of the world was colonized by the white Western people. Now this is Dutch East Indies. So Indonesia used to be called Dutch East Indies because it was colonized by the Dutch. So this is Dutch East Indies, now Indonesia. And this is Java, where Kartini comes from. So as you can see here, this is Java next to Sumatra and Borneo Island. And there are 4 places actually when we are talking about Kartini. So she was born in Jepara over here. And then at one point she went to Semarang. She was actually accepted to study in Batavia. Previously, she was actually also waiting to be educated in the Netherlands. But then she declined that, and also even she declined the scholarship to study in Batavia, and she ended up getting married and moving to Rembang, and she died in Rembang. So these are the 4 places important when we are talking about Kartini. So let's see. This is Kartini. She was born in 1879 and she died in 1904. So she lived in late 19th century, very early 20th century. She's part of the elite, Indonesian elite, because her father is RMAA Samingun Sosroningrat. So her father is a nobleman, and he also the regent of Jepara. So again, when we see this, so in the 19th century, Java was divided into a number of administrative regions, 23 administration, and here Jepara. So Kartini's father was the regent of Jepara. So her father was a regent of Jepara from 1880 to 1905, and her mother, Ibu Ngasira. So her father married her mother in 1872. And these are the children that they have. Kartini is the 4th. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 children. But so they got married in 1872. But since Ngasirah was not a noble woman, so he had to marry again a noble woman. So this is Kartini's stepmother, from whom she gets 3 more siblings. And there are 2 siblings, Rukmini and Karina, who were very close. So the 3 girls, they were very close, and they liked to learn, they wrote, they published, and but they are bound by tradition. So from 3 of them, they really wanted to educate their people, but somehow Karina was the first to force to marry, so she got married first. So when Kartini commenced her school in Jepara in 1903, we could only see Kartini and Rukmini because Kartina was already married. And later in 1903, Kartini also married the regent of Rembang. Even though initially in her letter, she said that she didn't want to get married, but eventually somehow, we'll talk about that later, that she decided to get married for, it's like a compromise. Some people accuse her of not really being a feminist, but she has her own reasons why she decided to get married. So she got married, she gave birth, and a few months later she died. So she died in 1904 when she was only 25 years old. So if we see the timeline, so 1879 she was born, 1904 she died in Rembang. So why Kartini is important? Because during her brief life, she read a lot. She graduated only from elementary school, but it was already an accomplishment back then for girls to be able to graduate from the Dutch elementary school. So she corresponded with so many people in the Netherlands and also in Indonesia. In 1911, some of her letters were published. Her letters were originally written in the Dutch language, so it was published in the Dutch language as well. The title in English is From Darkness into Light. In 1912, Kartini Foundation established to build Kartini School to provide education for Japanese girls. Was founded, established, and 1964. It's now Indonesia had already gained its independence. So Kartini was granted the title National Heroine, and her birthday, May the 21st, is nationally celebrated as Kartini Day. And we in Indonesia, we use Kartini we are familiar with Kartini because she's the mother of emancipation. So Kartini never used the word feminism. So just like what Anggita said earlier, that actually so many brown women, the so-called brown woman, if we differentiate white women and brown women, so many brown women actually live feminist life without claiming that they are a feminist. So feminist vocabulary doesn't appear in any of Kartini's letters, but she mentioned about emancipation, about equal rights, and she thinks more of the customs because she lives in Java. Japanese culture is from noble family, so there are traditions that restricted noble girls. So we can say that this is the concept of subaltern. I'm going to quote from Gayatri Spivak. Both as object of colonial historiography and a subject of insurgency, the ideological construction of gender keeps the male dominant. If, in the context of colonial production, the subaltern has no history and cannot speak, the subaltern as female is even more deeply in shadow. And this is also true about Kartini. She corresponded with many people, especially not only with women, but also with Dutch men. But somehow we did not really hear Kartini's voice until the collection of her letters were published. But even then, the first publication, so of course there are so many letters that she had written to so many people. But when we talk about the publication, the first book, Door Duits Nernis Totlik, I cannot speak the language, but so it was published in 1911, but somehow there are only 19 letters that are included in this publication. It's translated, so these collections was translated into a number of different languages, including Malay language. So we didn't really have Indonesian language back then. So in the 1938, it's translated, but of course also edited and adapted into a book called Habis Gelap Terbitlah Terang, similar with the English translation. And here in this publication, 21 letters were omitted from the 95 letters included in the original publication. When it's translated into English, so this 1938 publication excluded 29 letters. So we can see here that even Kartini's voice in the form of her letters are edited and presented differently. So this is why we can say that, well, okay, subaltern, first of all, her voice was not really heard when she was still alive. When it's finally heard, somehow it's probably not really what we don't really hear her voice in complete voice. So my presentation today, I look at her letters from these two publications by Jus Coates. So he's a scholar, Australian scholar, writes a lot about Kartini. So he published this book in 1992, and in 2014, he edited, translated, and published Kartini, the Complete Writing. So in this book, finally, we can see, maybe not most of all, because there are still letters that are kept by the recipients, and they did not want to share the letters because they consider that as private. not to talk about letters that probably are already missing somewhere. So in this publication, there are letters, also descriptive accounts. So there are part 1, part 2, part 3, 4, and 5. So in total, it includes 145 complete and also partial letters, originally written in Dutch, sent to 10 different recipients and 11 extended writing. So Kartini, so Indonesian people usually know Kartini for her letters. Not all of us have read her letters, by the way, but she has also written, she also wrote ethnographic articles and also published the articles, and also she wrote short stories. And this book also includes memoranda directed to Dutch and colonial government officials related to education for Java people. So as we can see here that Kartini is very progressive woman from her era, especially considering that she only graduated from elementary school, but she read a lot. So the questions that I'm asking these are the questions that I'm asking. What does it mean to be a colonized woman in the late 19th and early 20th century colonized space? How did Kartini doubly colonize, negotiate her aristocratic status while challenging colonialism and patriarchy? If we can say that if Kartini was a proponent of European feminine reform, because she was influenced a lot and she admired what Western, the Dutch women in Netherlands. So if she was a proponent of European feminine reform, how did she reveal her ambivalence in her imitation of Western feminism? And as part of the elite group, how did Kartini represent the subaltern voice? Because as we know that she had all the opportunities that she had because she came from the elite, because she's part of elite society. So we can say that she does not really represent common people, common women. She has different experience with common women, which is true, I think, when we are talking about women in terms of class. So in general, my argument is that Kartini's letters to numerous European recipients represent her subaltern voices while also record her ambivalence as she returns the gaze and speaks back to the colonizer. So this is part of my main argument. And I'm going to show some quotations from her letters that show how she wants to imitate the Western white women, but somehow she's also resistant. She's also she actually also able to criticize Western culture and also white women movement. So Ankita already mentions about Orientalism, the discourse on how white people, Western people see us Eastern people. So here, a quotation from Edward Said: "The Orient was almost a European invention and had been since antiquity a place of romance, exotic beings, haunting memories, and landscapes, remarkable experience." And we can see here an example. So this is from the foreword of Letters of a Javanese Princess, the translation of Kartini's letter into English. This is what, so Luis Cabarrus was a Dutch writer, and he spent his childhood in Java, in Batavia, for about 5 years. So he had been to Java. He said, "It was gentle, like the melodious song of a little bird in a cage. It was the voice of Raden Ajeng Kartini, like the cry of a little bird that wanted to spread its wing free in the air and fly towards life. It penetrated the distant Netherlands and was heard there with wonder and with delight." So from this quotation, we can see that he exoticizes Kartini and the reception of her voice by the Dutch. Song, a little bird in a cage. So it's the bird. So he talks about the song, the little bird, so little bird, and also the song, melodious song, pleasant to the ears. So exoticizes Kartini. But at the same time,
he also points to her oppression, imprisonment, and her struggles for freedom. Wanted to spread its wing free in the air and fly towards life. It penetrated the distant Netherlands. So exoticizes Kartini on the one hand, but also points up to her oppression, imprisonment, and her struggles for freedom. At the same time, by saying that, he also suggests vulnerability and inferiority. And also, we can also say that this is the stereotype of woman, brown woman. And when we also talking, when we talk in terms of white men saving brown woman from brown men, these Kartini's eagerness to fly towards life, to spread its wing free in the air, also represent the oppression by native men, by brown men, by Kartini's own men. And the word penetrated, we can also interpret that as the difficulties and effort to get heard. But once it's heard, it may also serve as a plea for help from the West. Again, so this is the discourse that we see when we are talking about brown women, women of color. But Kartini understands the stereotype. So she understands how the Dutch people see Indonesian is in this man. We call it Hindia Belanda in Bahasa Indonesia. But she really understands European stereotypes and prejudice against the Java people and how they see, especially Japanese women, are seen as either savage or authentic. So in one of her letters, she mentioned about a visit. So a professor, a German professor visits her father's house. And then this is what Kartini says. The professor expected us to be half savage and found us quite like ordinary people. Is it not pleasant to find one's own thought reflected in another? So Kartini understands the stereotype and understand how she's being seen by the white people. In another letter, she said that the Western people are wrong in thinking that Japanese women, Eastern women are inferior and not educated. This is another example. Not long ago, Raden Ayu was talking to a gentleman and impulsively she said, "Sir, excuse me, but may I make a friendly request? Please speak to me in your own language. Understand and speak Malay very well, but alas, only High Malay. I do not understand this Passer Malay." How our gentleman hung his head. So this is a Dutch man talking to a Japanese woman using Malay, but the woman, the Raden Ayu, does not understand because the language, the Malay language, is Passer Malay, low Malay. She claims that she can only speak Malay, High Malay, and also that she's very fluent in speaking the Dutch language. So these two examples already show that Kartini is very much aware of how the women, Japanese women, are being seen and treated, and the European stereotype and prejudice against the Japanese. But somehow, again, because Kartini is also, she went to the Dutch elementary school, and at one point in her life, she also wanted to be like white women. So this is what Homi Bhabha calls as mimicry and ambivalence. Colonial mimicry is desire for a reform recognizable other as a subject of a difference that is almost the same but not quite, which is to say that the discourse of mimicry is constructed around an ambivalence. In order to be effective, mimicry must continually produce its slippage, it access its difference. But in Kartini's case, we can see the movement on how she really wants, at one point, and on the one hand, she really wants to be like the white women. She admires the white women movement, but she's also able to criticize their movement, able to criticize the white women, criticize her own culture and also Western culture. And in the end, she eventually decided that it's better to not to be the white women, but to be brown women is fine. So pursuing her own struggle. So this is Kartini's situation. If the laws of my land permitted, there is nothing that I had rather do than give myself wholly to the working striving of the new woman in Europe. But its long tradition that cannot be broken hold us fast cloistered in their unyielding arms. Meaning that she wants, at one point, she wants to be like the white women, and she realized the custom that constrained her. So she's concerned more about the education for women, because here in this quotation, all of her male cousins and all her older brothers has completed the HBS, the highest educational institution we in the Indies, the Dutch Indies at that time. But Kartini, she could only finish elementary school, but even then, she's lucky to be able to do that. So we are talking about gender inequality experienced by Kartini. And for a noble girl like Kartini, the only career, so for men, they can have a career, they can be the official for the Dutch government, but for women, the only career is to be the wife. So when she asks her father, what will she be when she grow up, her father did not answer, but her brother overhearing the question, answer, what should a girl become? Why a Raden Ayu, a Japanese married woman of a high rank? And he said, naturally, it's just natural that the only career for women is to be a housewife. But in Japanese culture, noble men, it's common for noble men to have more than one wife. So this is what Kartini says in her letter. And can you imagine what helping a woman must suffer when her husband comes home with another arrival whom she must recognize as his legal wife? And this is her mother, the first wife. But because he's not a noble man, so the father needed to take another wife, a noble woman. And here, my mother knew when she followed father that she would one day get a mistress. Of her stepmother, she said, Mama cannot be blamed for the fact that there was a time that she did not love me and I never held a grudge against her for this. So that's why Kartini said, I long to be free, to be able to stand alone, to study, not to be subject to anyone, and above all, never to be obliged to marry. So didn't want to get married. She compares her situation with Western women's situation, and at least she thinks that Western women are lucky because they could choose their own partners, unlike Japanese women. So that's why this is a letter from 1899. I glow with enthusiasm toward the new time which has come and can truly say that in my thought and sympathies, I do not belong to the Indian world, but to that of my pale sister who is struggling forward in the distant West. So in his letter, it's India, Indian. When Kartini said India, Indians means that it's Dutch Indian, not India, the country India. Because there's a place where she mentioned about India, the other country. But then she also criticizes Western civilization. How can anything else be expected when in Europe, the center of civilization and enlightenment, the strife should have been so long and so bitter for the good right of the women? So she's also aware that even Western women, they have to struggle for so long. And the struggle was so long and so bitter for the Western women to get their rights. So she understands that while if Western women have to experience those things, so what can we expect for the Eastern women? And also, she criticized how the European women in the Dutch Indies, they care little or nothing for the work of their sisters in the fatherland. It means that white women in the Dutch East Indies who have privilege, they don't really care about the movement, the women movement in the Dutch. So therefore, she thinks about other brown women, not white women. So once he read about Pudita Ramaba, so this is this courageous Indian woman, I trembled with excitement, not alone for the white woman, is it possible to attain an independent position. The brown Indian too can make herself free. For days I thought of her and I have never been able to forget her. So initially she looks up to the Western women movement, but then she started to looking at, now we can actually brown women, we don't have to look at the Western women, but we also look at our sisters, the brown women. So this is in terms of education. In 1900, Kartini still writes, to go to Europe till my last breath, that shall always be my ideal. But then, about almost 3 years later, she said, we do not expect the European world to make us happier. The time has long gone by when we seriously believe that the European is the only true civilization, supreme and unsurpassed. So this shift of conviction not only exemplifies mimicry ambivalence, but also reveals Kartini's growing understanding of the virtues of her own civilization. So here, acknowledging the importance of European education, Kartini refuses to be seen as fully embodying European ideals. Because she says, for you see, I, as a born Javanese, know all about the Indian world. A European, no matter how long he may have lived in Java and studied existing conditions, can still know nothing of the inner native life. Much that is obscure now and a riddle to Europeans, I could make clear with a few words. It means that she's so fluent in the Dutch, she can express herself better because she knows not only the language, but also her own culture, her own people. In terms of education, she wants to educate the Japanese girls. She said, we do not wish to make our peoples half Europeans or European Japanese. If the people don't like to trust their daughters to European women, how much less would they be willing to trust them to those who were worse in their eyes, Japanese than European? Because there's also resistance in Java. They don't want their girls to be Europeanized, Westernized. So that's why, so that is one of the reasons why Kartini decided to get married, because he can see that she can see that her husband can actually help her in her struggle to provide education for Japanese girls. So after, this is a letter sent after her marriage, everything that was noble and beautiful in my eyes, I find here realized before me. Some of the dreams that I still dream, he has carried out years ago, and her dreams them now with me as the one in thought and eye. So, and also this is symbols for equality. Could not that bit of our life history become the life history of two peoples, of the Hollanders and of the Japanese? Would it not be possible for nothing but mutual love and respect to bind the Netherlands and Java together? So not only equality between genders, but also between Western and Eastern people. So yeah, that is all that I can share at this point. So we can start to discuss. Thank you.
Okay, thank you so much, Ms. Etta Farmacelia, PhD, for your very insightful presentation. So, Ms. Etta, bring us back to the Raden Ajeng Kartini era, where she is often referred as the symbolic of liberal feminism in Indonesia. Kartini has always been glorified as a female warrior who dares to fight gender inequality, where the rights of men in Indonesia during Dutch colonial period were prioritized at the time. So Kartini's figure is depicted as a fearless stout woman expressing injustice. Cartoonist name widely known through the letters that she wrote to her friends. The letter indicated cartoonist's deep grief on women's rights, which had never been fulfilled. Women always experience oppression, both physically and emotionally. The book of Habis Gelap Terbitlah Terang is a collection of letters that Kartini wrote earlier. Since then, feminism has become inherent in Kartini's soul. It was known that the thought of feminism characterized by liberals was obtained by Kartini due to the influence from Dutch friends in her school. Kartini read so many liberalism books, which further strengthened her belief that Indonesia was experiencing a gap in gender inequality. Okay. So maybe we can start our question and answer session. If you guys have some questions, you can use the raise hand feature to deliver your question directly to our speaker. Or also you can use the chat room or chat box to write your question, and I'll read it for you to our speakers to answer. So yes, please, anyone would like to ask question, please raise your hand.
There are a few questions in the chat.
Oh
Right.
yeah. Okay, so there is the question from Miss Eva to Miss Ankita. Speaking of culture and oppression toward feminism, particularly for Eastern women, do you think is it possible for Eastern women to fight against the cultural system which seemingly is still glorifying patriarchy over women without disregarding the cultural values that have been built a long time ago? Maybe Miss Ankita, you
Sure.
can please.
Yes, thank you for that question. And actually listening to Dr. Nurul Hadi's talk, that's what I was thinking, because it seems like Kartini herself becomes this this embodiment of what a post-colonial feminist could be. So there is always this tussle, right? You want to fight against oppression while maintaining the cultural ties, right? And that's why the framework of post-colonial feminism, according to me, works better than white Western feminist rhetoric, because this is always the tension we are carrying simultaneously. And I think it's possible to fight, but again, how we define fight is important to have a conversation about what fight looks like, what coalition looks like. Definitely building a coalition or a group of non-Western, non-white, gender thinkers is one way. Like, for example, if I just speak for myself, I always find myself struggling with that. You know what I mean? Like, I'm in a Western space where I really want my cultural ties to stay with me. And we have this joke going on in the diaspora: unless you go to US, you don't really realize what cultural ties you have, because I mean, there are hardly any cultural ties here. I don't think I would like to give an answer to that question in a very finalized way, because I feel like it's a flux. It always fluctuates. Maybe Etta can add more into it. But that's what I think. It's possible to keep resisting. Decoloniality is not only about just thinking about how we can change the power balance. It's also about keep pushing towards the center of power from the margins. And the more you keep pushing and the more discourses you create and you keep thinking, you're already decolonizing in some way. Does that answer the question? I hope I can clarify more.
Okay, thank you so much, Miss Ankita Ratur, PhD, for your answer on this question. So maybe we can move to Miss Etta. There is a question from Ibu Lina Rosliana. Dear Ibu Eta, allow me to ask a question. Was Kartini a post-colonialist or an Orientalist? Remembering that she voiced equality for her people, Indonesian women, and criticized the patriarchy in Indonesia. Thank you.
Okay. Yeah, Ankita will be able to add more to my answers. But when we talk about was he a post-colonialist or an Orientalist? So of course, and in the colonial term, something like is speaking, scholarly speaking, when we're talking about post-colonialists, we are talking about people talking about researching about things that happen in area that was once colonized. So, but is she an Orientalist? When we are talking about the term, an Orientalist is a scholar who studies about Oriental people. So, but what is Kartini? When we are talking about the idea of post-colonial feminists, yes, we can say that Kartini's idea represent post-colonial, the thought of post-colonial feminists, because she understands her own situation, her culture. She understands that to some extent, Eastern people are indebted to Western people, Western ideology or Western thought or Western education or knowledge whatsoever. But also she understands that she's also able to criticize. So if Kartini lives at this point, yeah, she's a post-colonialist feminist, I believe, because she criticizes patriarchal ideology and also she criticizes colonialism ideology. What do you think, Ankita?
Etta, I was actually thinking about that because your talk was so fascinating in terms of like complicating subalternity too. And especially, you know, like when it comes to Orientalist, because it's like, does it make us Orientalist just because we criticize patriarchy in our culture? And Edward Said says that there is an opposition to Orientalism. It can be called Occidentalism, and he cautions you against it. He's like, you know, let's not retaliate in the similar manner. But what your talk made me think about, Etta, is about kind of created subalternity when you think of Kartini. She's from the elite, right? She can speak Dutch. She can speak her own language. She is already a post-colonial feminist because the context matters and she's engaging with these two realities. But her missed letters and translated letters, the missing letters, there is so much lost in translation, you know, and it really made me think about what is not accessible and how that power fluctuates, that in the colonial context, somebody can be from the ruling class, but what does it mean when their work travels through a European conduit? You know what I mean? When there are European translators of a Javanese Indonesian woman's letters. So what was not translated? What was misinterpreted? And this already complicates subalternity in those ways. But when it comes to Orientalism, I think from what Said is saying, he speaks mostly in the context of Arabic culture, Arabic men. But it's Orientalism when there is a certain departure of your connection from your own culture, like the image I was showing, you know, kind of like merging these two opposite realities without really understanding it. So I don't know if I would term Kartini as an Orientalist. So far, I don't know about her. I would love to read her translated letters, and your close analysis was really terrific in those ways. But I don't know, Etta. I'm on a fence because it feels like it will be a little rushed to kind of claim her as an Orientalist, because I think the class difference is one argument to be made about it. There is already a class difference, so, and there are post-colonialists who are talking about that, because, as you climb into the class ladder, your way of seeing changes. You know what I mean? You kind of, there is a division from the cultural context around you. So I don't know, there are definitely, I feel there are residues, if we can talk about Orientalist residues. That's what I will say.
Yeah, right. It's actually very complex. Again, as you said, that not all of her letters are available for us, and also when we are talking, so this is the challenge faced by women. So especially, so Kartini was doubly colonized by patriarchal ideology, by her own men, and also colonized by Western men. So yeah, to some extent, we can say that she's a post-colonialist feminist. At least she live with the idea of being a feminist, even though she never claims to be a feminist. But again, when we are talking, so this is the thing, Kartini has all the privilege because of her class status, that she's noble girl, that she's part of the upper class. So is she an Orientalist? Just maybe yes, to some extent, but her experience doesn't represent the experience of common people. So somehow, even though she has that progressive ideas, but she knows more about her class situation, not really about the common people's lower class situation or common woman. So we cannot also say that probably to some extent she doesn't also represent the experience of common women from the lower class. And I think this is true when we are talking about feminism in general, because when we are talking about feminism in general, it's feminism for white women coming from middle class. Here, Kartini sees brown women from the upper class. So when we cannot really say that she represents the experience of women in general. And yeah, so a question from Ibu Lucia. So studying postcolonialism, feminism in Indonesia, perhaps in Asia, seems to me only exists in books, not practical because of values and norms. A lot of still oppressed women in origin life. Would you share your opinion? Yeah, it's true. I think, but I don't agree that if we claim that it only exists in books. Because actually, by understanding our situation, by understanding feminism, postcolonial feminism, we become more aware of our situation. And even though there are still, well, to some extent, we are still oppressed, but there are also opportunities that we already gained by increasing our awareness of our situation and struggle to get betterment in women's situation.
I mean, this in itself is decolonizing feminism, what is happening here. I mean, the event you all have managed to do with more than 200 participants, I mean, it tells something. It's already punching up, and we speak in English. So it's a weird, how to say, gift we have gotten from the colonizer. We are going to master your language and we are going to use it against you. So, I mean, this is already happening. Post-colonial feminism is already in motion, for sure. And that's why I said, because Western white feminist is like, this is a very vast Western rationality thing. Annette, I don't know if you agree. It's like they define a lot of things. They don't leave anything undefined. I'm going to claim knowledge. I come across a table, I want to call it a table. I come across this person, I really need to figure out their race. and it's like, leave it. Nobody, I discovered India. No, India was already there. You didn't discover. You actually made a wrong turn. You wanted to go somewhere else and you came somewhere else and you started calling it India. And that is the Western rationality. So Western feminism works that way. I'm going to write about this thing. I'm going to have an argument about this particular thing. It is going to get published. Yeah, exactly. What about the people writing papers in their own native language? What about the translations? And so this definition, that's why I'm very skeptic when it comes to feminism. And it's, as I said, it's a struggle, for the easiness. Yes, I am a post-colonial feminist, but if I really want to dig deeper, it's like, how do I feel about this terminology? So I think post-colonial feminism is already happening because we're questioning these things together. I don't know what you have to add to that, Etta, but for me, this is already a big victory.
Yeah, I think I agree with you that it's happening. And when we are talking about changes, of course, we cannot really expect drastic change. We are moving forward, I believe, because patriarchal here for centuries, but we are. I think it's happening, increasing awareness. Then we can make betterment.
There is one more question in the chat. Should I take it because it's addressed to me?
Yes, please.
Well, the question is, you give the example of the covered Black women oppressed due to Western colonization in third world countries. What do you think of the covered veiled white women? Are they differently treated in Western countries, or are they oppressed in different ways? That's a great question, actually. And I would like to start by saying that I deliberately use that image because I'm talking about the United States context. The racial discussions are very flawed in the United States. Let me be very open with this, okay? And the image of a Black Muslim woman is not that openly known. You know what I mean? That there can Islam that has existed in countries in Africa, that's not a common knowledge. And I feel like, and so that was the image used to be like, okay, there is Islam by being practiced by African women in African countries. And that's a very great question. And what is the difference of oppression? Because the race conversation in America is flawed. And by that, it means it really gets into the nitty-gritty of like, who is white, who is close to white, who is not white. So within, for example, African-American community here, there is like, who is more Black than the other African-Americans. So it's a very complicated discussion happening. But if you think about especially post 9/11 context in the US, the veiled woman or the woman in a hijab or a burqa, I think it's context-based, obviously. When I was at LSU with Etta in Baton Rouge, I heard from many of my, I wouldn't say veiled women, but like covered women, the kind of comments they used to face. And I feel like it is a familiarity because in US, we are now so much having conversation about Blackness. The figure of Blackness is known, you know what I mean? But the figure of a veiled white woman is not known yet. And that's why we are creating these discourses and that is why familiarity is so important. These discussions are so important because yes, let's talk about what the covering represents. And in US, it's very tricky because it's not only about the headscarf or covering of women, it's also about men, So for example, Sikh men get assaulted here because of the turban. And I mean, it's very complicated. In a very easy, simple way, I would say like this is a conversation we must be having more robustly. It is not there yet. And there can be similarities in oppression, but I feel there also can be difference in oppression based on this familiarity of the subject matter, who we keep repurposing in the public domain, if that answers the question. But I think that's what, from where I'm standing, from what I'm observing conversations around me, that it will be, there is so much misconception about head covering, which is very interesting because there are white women who also cover their head going out in the sun. But the hypocrisy is lost on the problematics of white Western feminism right now. But yeah, I would say that it depends on the familiarity and how much of that image has been into circulation in public consciousness that would determine the range of oppression.
Yeah, but Ankita, I think sometimes it depends on what we are talking about. When we are talking about white women covered in fields, sometimes we don't talk about we don't really talk about the issue of feminism. We don't talk about feminism, but probably this is prejudice again, particular faith or particular belief. So it doesn't matter whether you're white or whether you're brown women.
Exactly.
But,
That's a very important question. That's,
Mhm.
that's a very important point. That's what I was thinking, especially like in the post 9/11 context in the US, right? I thought it's like it became a war on terror, and there were certain images which just got processed. And that's why I said, like, yeah, there are contexts where the oppression can be very similar, just based on the faith, for sure. I see one more question.
Yeah. So there's another question. Before Kartini era, do I believe that feminism in Indonesia exists already? If we talk feminism as equality, what women were during the war against the Dutch colonial, and how important is feminism in Indonesia in such context? Thank you. Yeah, so talking about feminism, when we talk about feminism, again, feminism is a Western concept. So it started in the Western world, and then we appropriate the Western concept. But actually, just like Kartini exemplifies that she lived feminist life. I mean, she has feminist thought. She living the life as a feminist without claiming that she's a feminist. And when we are talking about patriarchal society, about gender equality, the fact that she has to submit to polygamy that she opposes very much, shows that, well, that's a question whether is she really a feminist when she agrees to marry, become the third wife of a regent, an older man. So, but we can also see from Kartini's ideas that she believes that women should struggle against patriarchy. And when we are talking in Indonesia context, did feminism already exist before Kartini era? Yes, I guess so. Because again, as you mentioned here, Damai Rahmawati, that we have women warrior fighting with men against Dutch colonialism. So actually, when we are talking about women's struggle in Indonesia, probably they did not really think in terms of gender equality, but they think in terms of themselves as colonized people, and they struggle to free themselves from colonialism. So even though, again, they didn't think of themselves as feminists, but they actually practice feminist ideas already. So I can say that, yes, feminism did exist even before Kartini era, because there are a number of examples from, one of them is from Dutch warrior. We have Cut Nyadin, we have Cut Mutia. They did not really talk about gender equality. They talk about freeing themselves, freeing their people from Dutch colonialism. So, feminists, there are some involved, but yes, I do believe that it existed before this era. Maybe you can give an example from India context, Ankita?
Yeah, same answer. Because I have been thinking, and maybe this can be the redefinition of feminism. It's about women living their life with the consciousness of how they're living it. and definitely, I mean, think about it. India has a women prime minister. Guess which country didn't have a women prime minister yet? US. So these are some facts we need to really think about. And in my very, very personal opinion, and I hope I'm proved wrong, I don't see US having a female president very soon.
Right. Indonesia had female president once. So
what does that mean?
We're actually more
What does that
progressive
mean?
than Western
So
people.
the power that white Western feminists are like, oh, we have created this. I'm very sorry. We have been doing this for years, for centuries.
Mhm.
And that is why, that is my very, very, that's my problem with this word feminism. It's like, because it is defined in a certain way, and there is no, like, very little room, like Zakaria and Mohanty say the same thing, that there is very little room to kind of interject yourself. Unless, like Zakaria says, you're in a headscarf on a skateboard, which is a very familiar kind of resilience, like you go girl, boss girl, blah, 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 which is empty rhetoric. So in India too, definitely. And here's a weird fact I will give you, the colonial hypocrisy. When the colonizers came to India, there were Indian women in certain parts of the subcontinent who will be bare-chested, right? They were not covering themselves fully. So they got shocked. Oh my God, very immoral women, let's cover them. So they covered us. Now we cover because of our choice, and they're like, oh, you're so oppressed. And that is the key colonial hypocrisy you look at. Right. So, and then also think about, like, I don't know if you have heard about it. India's, in Indian feminist context, widow immolation was a practice that kept happening, right? Women were supposed to sit on the pyre with their dead husband and die. And it is a very controversial issue. But what Britishers did, they were very horrified, right? And I'm not claiming here that that was a great practice, obviously. But what Britishers did, they defined India in this way, the colonizers. Oh my God, so brutal. Guess what else they did? They actually set on fire a 13-year-old girl because she was a revolutionary and she was passing messages to her father, who was a revolutionary. So do you see the hypocrisy here? Are you really telling me that the crime you are committing against my women, and you have the moral authority to criticize the practices and criminalize a whole pattern? So yes, Etta, I think feminism has always been in the regions we are from. It's just that we have been late in claiming it. And we didn't claim it in the English language. We didn't really think about it because we are very Eastern people. We live our lives without any interest of claiming knowledge. And that is the crux of our struggle here. And well, we have the tool now. Maybe we can keep creating in the English language. So yeah, we have lived, have been doing it for so long.
Yeah, right. So I think the same hypocrisy happened also during Kartini's era, because so her father had to take a noble woman as a legal wife. But there's also, in her letter, Kartini mentioned about a regent in Java who refused to get a second wife from noble woman because he didn't want to hurt his wife. So legally speaking, he was still single, even though he had a wife. So, and that's also part of feminist movement, I believe.
We have similar examples in India. And I mean, oh my God, this can be such a big topic, but we have similar examples in India within my family. And where I'm from, I don't know if you have heard, to complicate gender further. Have you heard of groom kidnapping?
No.
My father was a victim. He's a survivor. My own father. What happened in this state? So let me shock you. I have so many shocking facts when it comes to post-colonial feminism and complicating Western feminism. So where I'm from, it's an Eastern state in India, right? There is a lost of caste hierarchy, upper caste, you are born in a particular family. But there was this practice which still goes on, that there is a group of patriarchal women and men. So suppose in a family, a daughter is born and let's say she's disabled in some way. maybe she can't see from one eye or anything, or she's like overweight. So it's a very sexist way, and they determine you're unmarriageable, right? So let's go kidnap a guy who has a job, who is well off, and let's get them forcibly married. This was a practice which was carried out against men. And my dad, who was married, I was born, my sister was there. He used to go to his office somewhere far 30 minutes ago. And one day after his job, he was returning on a bike. And this men coming with like revolvers took him. And I'm writing a personal essay about this. I really want to tell my dad's story. Took him in a car, started beating him, and like a very Bollywood hero, he escaped somehow. But they were not listening to him that, oh, I'm married and I have 2 children. And it complicates gender and the feminism, because one of the things I also like to think about is who will tell the story of these men and where does it fit within the feminist project? You know what I mean? So there are,
Right.
so yeah, very, very similar things like, oh, you have not, you go and marry into a bigger class, but the husband had fallen in love with the wife he has. And he's like, well, I'm not interested. So yeah, similar rules, if not the same, but yeah.
Yeah.
So yeah, maybe it's really fascinating discussion today. And I think we already reached the end of our interesting discussion today. Thank you so much for Miss Ankita and Miss Eta. And thank you so much for all the participants also. So let's join me in giving applause to our speakers, Miss Ankita and Miss Eta. Okay, and maybe I can hand over you back to the Master of Ceremony, Mbak Septianti.
And before we conclude this seminar, I'd like to take a moment to thank all of our distinguished speakers for the valuable insights and expertise that they have shared with us today. Therefore, Ibu Eta Farmacelia Nur Hadi, PhD, will symbolically hand over the certificate to the speakers today, Mrs. Anggita Rathore, PhD.
Yeah.
Yes, Dr. Anggita Rathore, thank you for sharing your knowledge with us. Thank you for this exciting talk and very insightful talk. And this is, this is implementation arrangement. Thank you for agreeing to talk today, this morning, late at night at your place. I appreciate that. And this is our token of appreciation. It's the certificate. As a speaker, we really appreciate your cooperation, your willingness to share knowledge with us, to work together with us. Hopefully we can work together in different areas, different things. Maybe we can have a joint research or something like that. And also, thank you also for the books that that you donate.
Entirely my pleasure. Please, please. There's no thank you. This is I live for it. We should be doing this more.
Yeah.
This is the hill I will die on. So the pleasure is entirely mine. I'm extremely honored to do this. And the late night doesn't matter. You want me at 2 a.m., I can do it.
Thank you. Thank you, Dr. Anggita Rathore.
Okay, thank you very much for all the speakers and Punti Rahayu Nurmaningtyas MS as our moderator. Ladies and gentlemen, we have come to the end of the enlightening and informative seminar. I hope you all have enjoyed and benefited from the presentation and discussions. I wish you all the best in your future endeavors and hope to see you again at our next seminar. Have a great day. Wassalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh.
Thank you.
Thank you, everyone. Thank you. Good night from here.
Good night.
And please email me. Please be in touch for whatever you need. Thank you so much.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you, Anggita.
Bye.